when I tell you I have never been more scared in my life to do anything. And I've taken some big swings at work. I've moved cities. I've broken up with boyfriends. I've leaped, okay? But this card game, it scared me like nothing else. And it's because it is such a huge investment and you're thinking, oh my God, is anybody even going to buy it?
Hey lovely, Lisa here, and before we dive into today's episode of She Talks, I have got a little favour to ask you. If this podcast has ever made you feel a little bit more confident, a little bit more inspired, or a little less alone in this wild ride of running your own business, then I would love you to leave us a review on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you're listening. I know it sounds like a small thing, but it really helps get She Talks into the ears of more incredible women just like you, and it helps us keep bringing you the good stuff. And if there's an episode that made you go, oh my God, every woman in business needs to hear this, please share it with someone you love. Text it to your business bestie, add it to your stories, or drop the link in a group chat. However you do it, we are so grateful. All right, that's it from me. Let's jump in. In this episode, I'm joined by the powerhouse that is Danielle Robay, media personality, podcast host, and creator of the viral Question Everything card game. But that's just the surface. Danielle is the co-executive producer of Reese Witherspoon's Hello Sunshine Book Club, where she is reshaping what modern storytelling looks like. She's also interviewed some of the world's most fascinating humans, from Bradley Cooper to Jada Pinkett Smith, and she brings that same presence and depth to our chat today. We're going to talk about building confidence by doing it messy, and about why envy might be your soul pointing north, about how trauma, self-worth, and fear don't have to hold you back. They can be the fuel that moves you forward. Danielle's a master interviewer. She's helped thousands of people feel seen. But today, I want to flip the mic and really see her. This convo goes everywhere, from therapy to TikTok to what it really takes to find your voice when the world keeps telling you to shrink. So if you've ever felt the pull to speak up, do more, be more, then this one's for you. Let's dive in. Danielle, welcome to the podcast today. And I have to tell you, I'm actually a little bit intimidated and nervous interviewing you today. So I'm excited to see where we go. Welcome.
Lisa, thank you. That's such a kind welcome and absolutely no need to be nervous. I think I'm the nervous one because I'm usually on the other side of the interview. So we're kind of both in weird spaces.
Right. And I think what's made me nervous, and I want to summarize it for our beautiful listeners today, is that what you've been called is the queen of questions. And I think that's made me question my questions. I'm like, I'm the one asking the queen of questions. And now I'm like, I've confused myself. I actually am just going to get our script and I'm going to throw it out the window. No questions. We're just going to ad lib.
Well, I've listened to your podcast and you're so easy to talk to. So I love the idea of throwing it all out. But we can get into questions because I do think there's a bit of an art and a science to it.
Well, I want to talk about that with you, actually. Listeners, I've just told Danielle what I always describe it to my podcast guests as: imagine we're having either a spicy margarita or a latte, depending on your flavor. And we are literally just having a two women geeky conversation around life. And that's pretty much how I described it to Danielle today. So we'll give you that. But I want to bring the flavor and the richness of your experience out today, Danielle. And I do have some good questions to ask you, although they may not be good questions compared to your questions.
We can rate them at the end if you want, but I have a feeling they're going to be fabulous.
Perfect. Well, I want to kick off firstly Larry King said you have the ability to make people feel seen. And I think this is a very unique gift. And in a world full of 1.5 second attention span, I want you to tell us, how do you make people feel seen?
So the thing I always say is a quick tagline that I deeply believe, which is the most interesting thing is to be interested. And most people, when they get nervous, they feel like they need to be the most interesting person in the room, or they need to come up with something spectacular to say or compliment somebody. I think a very quick thing to do when people meet is say, oh, I love your shoes, because it kind of breaks the ice. And that's not bad. But to look at somebody and to be inquisitive, to be interested in what they're saying is so powerful. I know this sounds crazy, but most people do not get a podcast is so interesting because most people do not get listened to for more than 10 minutes at a time, unless they're in therapy, maybe in their whole lives. And so to have someone take the time to listen and be interested in you, oh my goodness, people just light up.
And that's the secret to being seen then, is actually having someone pay attention and listen.
Well, I always think that questions are almost like an invitation. That's why they can be nerve-wracking, because someone can turn down your invitation, right? Like they can be like, oh, that's silly, or that's too deep, or I don't want to answer that. So it feels vulnerable to ask a question sometimes. But it is an invitation to another person to be present, to see one another, to be in conversation, to more deeply connect. And I always say questions are my love language. I don't need gifts, and I like quality time. But I mean, if you want to be in deep conversation with me, nothing makes me, like it's the best.
I love that. And I think it's like a symbol of the time we live in right now, that the questions have disintegrated into entertainment worthy. And I will freely admit to just recently trying TikTok for my own personal brand, the Lisa Jones, social media presence. And I hired a 21-year-old to be my content producer, and she's amazing. She's a journalism student. She's adorable. But the content we're pushing out, well, it doesn't appeal to me. It makes me feel a little frivolous. And I think that's a sign where we're trying to entertain. But what you're talking about, or what I would like to envisage that you're talking about, is a much deeper connection. And that's the bit I find really hard to segue. Everybody has a 2-second attention span and they're looking to be entertained. But equally, we're talking about deeply connecting with another human being, listening to them, asking them intriguing questions and hearing them. And those two things are polar opposites. How do we navigate that?
I think that's such an interesting point that you made, because TikTok has actually said that they don't compete with Instagram. They compete with Netflix. They are an entertainment platform, and they are competing for our attention. So I do think you have a point in terms of trying to have that first catchy line. But one of the things I like about TikTok is I do find that people want to be educated on there. I see like a trend across social media that there's a rise in thought leaders, in experts. It's not just fashion and lifestyle influencers anymore. And so I actually think it's the best time ever to be Lisa Jones, because you can get on TikTok or get on Instagram and people actually want to learn from you and hear your stories. And then hopefully it just drives them to the podcast. Can I ask you why it seems frivolous? Because I do think there's probably a solve for it.
I think it's because, and I wouldn't even hesitate to guess your age, apart from commenting on the fact that, listeners, she is absolutely drop dead gorgeous.
You're so sweet. I'm 34.
I turn 47 next week, which is pretty close to 50. And I think I just am not of the TikTok generation. I go to Instagram as my primary, I suppose, entertainment platform. And so I watch my daughter flicking through TikTok and, for hours and hours and hours. And I actually feel distressed about that. I don't know what she's doing to her brain function right now, but that makes me sound like my mother, which is old and boring. I sound awful. I need to reframe this, Danielle.
No, I get it. I mean, I think if I can make a suggestion, which is something I do to anybody who sort of feels complicated about social media, because I understand the complications and the weird feelings, but I do think that social media is an incredible tool to connect with people. And so I think the best thing to do is to follow people that you enjoy watching, even if it's 2 or 3 of them. Follow them for a week and actually spend a little time on the platform and see why you like following them. Because I guarantee you can take whatever that secret sauce is and apply it to what the Lisa Jones secret sauce is. I wasn't TikTok native either, and it took me a little while because I'm a full millennial on Instagram, but I actually really like the platform now.
I love that bit of advice, and I think that's so valid. I believe that a lot of our listeners are going to relate to me and feeling a little bit ancient right now. But I love the idea of, instead of seeing it as a flick and scroll, let's actually go looking for a few people that inspire you and then see how they're showing up. Because that ultimately is what it's meant to be. It's a look under the hood of a human and see if you actually do, I suppose, voyeuristically enjoy who they are, or align with them morally, or love their home decor, or the handbag they're wearing to this week. That's the opportunity we have in social media, is to see people in a way we never used to. And I think that's the bit I've maybe missed.
I don't know if you've missed it because I do think that you are a person, from what I have listened to, that is wanting the real stuff. You want deep connection, but I don't know that TikTok is the realm to go, like is the place to go for that. I heard Esther Perel, who's a wonderful sex and relationship expert and therapist, and she said that Instagram and social media is a high communication, low connection environment. And so when you're thinking about friendships, we may have thousands of people online, but who's there to feed your cat or drive you to the airport? Those are two very different people and different friends. And so I think it's about the intention, right? Like if we're going to TikTok or Instagram for the people that feed our cat, we're probably misaligned. But if you're going to be entertained, to educate, I think it can be a cool thing.
Yes, I think you're 100% correct. So look for different heart-filling, cup-filling, soul-filling things in different places and see TikTok for what it is. I want to ask you, you talk a little, and there's a quote I found somewhere that of course I can't find right now, but it's around leaping before the net appears. And I want to talk about that for a minute because our predominant audience over here on the She Talks podcast are usually product brand founders. And it's really scary to launch a product brand. I mean, it's scary to launch any business for a woman, but in particular product brands because they have such a lot of cost upfront. You know, you've got to purchase stock.
The scariest thing ever.
You've got to wait sometimes 6 months before the stock arrives, during which you've chewed your nails to the quick. I want to know, like, what have you learned about this jumping without a net, and what can you share with us today?
So I love that you understand how hard and how scary it is to launch a product brand, because I have a card game called Question Everything, and I created it in 2021. When I tell you I have never been more scared in my life to do anything, and I've taken some big swings at work. I've moved cities. I've broken up with boyfriends. I've leaped, okay? But this card game, it scared me like nothing else. And it's because it is such a huge investment and you're thinking, oh my God, is anybody even going to buy it? I personally I ordered 200 SKUs at the beginning and I thought that was a lot. And I didn't know if anybody besides my mom or my friends would even purchase it. And on Shopify, you can see exactly who buys. And so the day of launch, I had put so much money into it and I'd created content and ads and all of it. And I go to Shopify to see who's purchased, if anybody, just crossing my fingers. And my mother did not purchase. My friends did not purchase. You know, the people who purchased? The people who purchased were all female founders because they saw how scary it was. They knew what it was like and they were supporting me. And then obviously it grew from there. But I have so many thoughts on creating a product. And for anybody out there listening who is creating one, has created one, is thinking of creating one, first of all, I commend you, because it takes so much creativity and self-belief. And truly, you are a part of a club. Like, you are a part of a club that other people do not understand. I always say that entrepreneurship is almost a spiritual experience because it forces you to grow personally as much as it does professionally. It has left me on my kitchen floor crying multiple times. That's a fear and an anxiety and a sadness that people do not understand unless you've experienced it, So the very long answer to your question, long-winded, windy road, is the leap before the net appears is something I actually learned from Steve Harvey, funny enough, but I saw it in one of his talk shows. And he has an incredible story of self-belief. He was homeless at one point or unhoused, and obviously is one of the wealthiest men in the world and entertainers now. And he said this, and I didn't understand it till I launched the card game, because you have to almost believe before you can see the way. And I'm not saying don't have a business plan or don't research, but you're never going to be able to anticipate or truly visualize what will come of things. And if you have that whisper or that feeling inside of you, I believe it is there and it has been put on your heart for a reason. And you have to follow it. And it doesn't mean that you will be successful in the product, but it means that you are becoming the person you are meant to be on the way to that journey. And so I do believe in that whisper.
And you know what else I've learned in my years is the opposite of that, is that I feel like fate or our greater purpose of why we're here, it's almost like it comes across sometimes as a whisper in your ear. It's like, psst, 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 here's what you need to do. And we have a choice. We either listen to that and we follow it or we ignore it. And I
Yeah.
like the concept that it's a fairy or an angel or it's our higher self or it's whatever you want to call it. And the truth is that that whisper will happen a couple of times, maybe many times, but then it'll stop whispering in our ear and it'll go to somebody else's ear. And then that business idea or that opportunity that we felt we were too scared to take the leap into, even if it felt aligned with something that would be purposeful for us, if we ignore it because we let our insecurities or our imposter syndrome stop whispering it to us, it's going to go to someone else. And then it happens all the time for women with brands where like 12 months later, they're like, oh, fuck, somebody else bought that out. That was exactly what I wanted to bring out. And it's because you weren't showing up and you didn't follow the curve on that idea. And so somebody else did it. And that is potentially a greater loss to the world than if you tried and failed.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that it will go to somebody else, because I've always thought of culture as like a wave or a current, and you're either in the current or you're not. And so you can decide to skip that wave, which maybe sometimes it's okay, but I agree the idea does go elsewhere. It's interesting. I'm curious if you have this at all. I think sometimes that whisper shows up for me in two other ways. It'll show up as curiosity, which I think people don't think about as much, but there's sort of like a, I wonder what that would be like, or I wonder what that feels like, or I wonder what it would be like to be on that stage. And so I think there's a curiosity. And then what I also find is there can be an envy. And a very smart author said to me once, you must follow your envy. I don't like jealousy, but envy is different. And so she said, if you're scrolling on Instagram and you're seeing something that somebody else has that you are envious of, you must follow that, because that means you can have it too. And so when I was younger, I'll give you an example. There was all these women's conferences. I was working in entertainment news, and all these women's conferences started popping up. In America, it was the Makers Women's Conference, and it was Hello Sunshine Shine Away. And I was like, oh, I would die to be in that room. And I was covering the Grammys and the Oscars, and I didn't really care. I didn't really want to be there. And somebody else was dying to be in those rooms. But my envy was at these women's conferences, and I had to follow that whisper and that envy to women's media, which is really where my heart lies. But I'm wondering if it shows up for you in those ways at all.
I think it is. And I think it's like a temperature gauge or a thermometer. And I think that's what you're talking about. And it's more than it's the whisper and it's the curiosity and it's the envy, but all of them are essentially some kind of radar or gauge for us to be able to determine if there's something in it for us. Because I do believe as women, I think, I can't speak for everybody, but my understanding is a lot of women are too scared to live their full purpose in this world. And I know in the US, you guys are way better at uplifting women, but here in Australia, we have something we call the tall poppy syndrome. I don't know if you've heard of this before, but we kind of look down on really successful women. We feel somehow like their glow or their bigness makes us smaller or less okay. And it's probably not envy. It's more just, I suppose, more an actual just jealousy, and it's kind of ugly. One thing I love about my time when I come to the US is that I feel you don't have this. You're like way more amazing at celebrating women who are successful. But I think all of those things kind of combine into this idea of like, what if I'm too big? What if I'm too seen? What if I'm too great? What if I'm too bright? What about if when I'm too bright, people then turn all their attention on me? Now, I want to tell you a slightly different story because I think this also ties in so perfectly to this topic, which is I've lost 60 kilos in the last 5 years. And I allowed, I suppose, let's call it emotional eating. But what I had to determine is that emotional eating also created a protection layer around me. And that protection layer physically protected me from the world and perhaps wounding that the world might give me. I am too much, or I am not enough, or I am not in the place I'm meant to be. And I think for a lot of women, it may not be weight. There's probably other things that we do that serve us to stop, almost like create a buffer from the world.
Yeah.
And I think women do this in lots of different ways. But one of them is that I can't follow that business idea, or I can't listen to that angel in my ear, because what if I'm not safe if I'm that big and seen? And I feel that's very, very relevant for women in general. And we've just tied about 30 different topics, and I'm trying to pull them all into one thread here, but I think they
Yeah.
really align. It's the imposter syndrome. It's the fear of greatness that stops us from going down that route.
I hear what you are saying. And first of all, 60 kilos is almost like it's like a teenager. You must feel like a different person.
Oh, I do. And I have 2 meters,
Wow.
just over 2 meters of stitches because I've had all my excess skin on my arms, legs, and stomach removed. And I feel like a
Wow.
sexy beast. Let me tell you, I wander around the house nude all the time. And my husband is like scorer of the century because he fell in love with me when I was a larger lady, and he loved me just as
Oh
much
my
then as he does
God.
now. So we're both like, we pinch ourselves.
Congratulations. That's so cool, Lisa. That's not an easy journey.
It's not. I agree. It's not.
Yeah.
But tying it into this conversation, I felt really scared to lose the weight. I think it was one of the reasons
Yeah.
why I didn't for a long time was I was like, but what if I'm too big or too pretty or too seen? Or what if men check me out and
Yeah,
I feel unsafe? Or what about if the girls pick on me or something, just something?
for sure. I think there's so much stuff there subconsciously that we all feel in some ways. I'll give you, because you said, what if? I'll give you another what if question that I think about often. And I do these on my Instagram before every new year because I like to just take stock and think about what happened this year and what I could do better next year. And the last question I ask myself every single year before I jump into the next is, what would happen and what would I do if I could not fail? And it sounds a little bit trite, but if you are thinking about starting that business or losing the weight or changing relationships, I think thinking about the worst case scenario and then thinking about how you would act if failure was not a possibility really quickly shows you what the path is. And it sort of drowns out all the fear, for me at least.
I don't know why we don't all ask ourselves that question potentially every day. Like, I
Yeah.
think fear, I can only speak for me, but I think fear has held me back from a lot of things in this world and decisions that I might have made differently. And in saying
Yeah.
that, the opposite of fear is bravery. And I actually have tattooed on my arm now, like, fortune favors the brave. Because for me, I recognize, I have my 7th company in 18 years, and we're back up in the, many, many millions of dollars a year revenue. And I have nearly 70 women in my team. And that is me. All, like, somehow this scared little woman started her 7th company and has done a 3rd multi-million-dollar brand. And that doesn't happen without intense courage and bravery. So whilst I worry
Intense.
about being too much for the world, I also am like, fuck it. I'm kind of just going to go for it.
Can I ask you a deep question?
Yes.
So I sort of have this like armchair hypothesis that we all have 2 or 3 major issues to overcome in our lives, and they're different for each of us. It sounds like fear was a big one for you. Do you know via therapy and a lot of excavation where that came from?
I do. And it ties really perfectly against the other one, which sits alongside fear for me, which is people pleasing. And this is really prevalent for a lot of women. And it usually comes from some form of controlling parent. In my case, a very, very loving mother who was quite strong-willed. And I then got put into what my parents felt was the best approach, which was a very elitist private girls' school. And the combination of those two things, of me never feeling worthy, but equally feeling like I needed to please everybody, is 100% how I ended up in a domestic violence marriage. And I look back now and can see I no longer please people. I also no longer rescue people, which conversely sits alongside it. But I'm going to go with like 15 years of therapy to unpack and let go of. And perhaps that's why I'm in my brave era now.
Wow. Thanks for sharing that. The word worthy really sticks out to me. I've interviewed probably thousands of people at this point, Fortune 500 CEOs and celebrities, therapists, activists, athletes. And there are a few universal truths that I've seen. I'm sure you see it on your podcast, but worthiness is one of them. And it is every single person's life journey. And it all stems from different things. And it's funny, I thought years ago, about 3 years ago, I thought I had escaped worthiness because I always felt very confident. I never even thought of the word worthy. And I always walked into rooms and felt confident and felt like I wanted the best for others. And I felt full. And a friend of mine called me And he said, you know, Danielle, you deserve good things. And I started crying on the phone, and I put him on mute because I didn't want him to hear me crying. And I didn't know why why the tears were coming down my face. And he said, confidence is what you think of yourself, but worth is what you think you deserve. And just because you are confident does not mean that you feel worthy. And I had to hang up the phone because I was a mess. But that I was so grateful to him because that took me on this entire journey of worthiness. And I started trying to make daily decisions based on my worth because I had read a book about character. And this guy, David Brooks, who's a great writer in America, he writes for the New York Times, wrote a book called The Road to Character. And he says that it's built in very small decisions every single day over the course of long periods of time. And every time you make a choice that builds your character, you continue up that ladder. And every time you make one that denigrates it, it's harder to continue going upwards. And I thought of worthiness the same way. And so I started buying the $5 coffee and saying, I'm worth it. And then I would try and negotiate for more at work when it scared the ish out of me because I was like on a worthy personal worth journey. And I can tell you, I don't feel totally worthy. It's not perfect yet, but 3 years later, it is much better. And so I know that it's doable. And I mean, hearing stories like yours makes me believe that even more deeply.
And yes, I couldn't agree more. Tell me the incredible people that you've interviewed. I suppose a theme would be they wouldn't be being interviewed with you if they weren't somewhat successful and perhaps very successful.
Yeah.
What correlation have you drawn between success and worthiness amongst the people you've interviewed?
I'm going to caveat to say I did news for quite some time before I started my podcast or doing entertainment. And so I've interviewed people who are not like quintessentially successful financially or have a lot of different lived experiences. I think one of the things that I have seen with successful people, Oprah will say that the through line is they know where they're going. I actually disagree with her, and I don't disagree much with Oprah, but I haven't found that. There's a lot of successful people I interview that have started a company and had no idea what it was going to turn into or what they wanted to do. They just followed the inkling. What I have found is that they believed that they could. And so I really, I know it sounds so simple, but I think like 90% of getting something done is just believing that you can. It's huge. Do you find that?
Oh, it has to be. I mean, I actually agree with you and Oprah, although perhaps more inclined to say what you've nailed is the key bit, which is there's a belief system that they can. And in fact, if we flick it on its head and say, what stops some women from achieving great success, it's that is missing. They question themselves or they somehow don't commit or feel they're worthy enough to stay committed to the road, because the bit that we haven't shared is, and I'm sure Danielle will agree, it's a bumpy fucking road. And it actually isn't straight, and it has potholes and it has excavation. It even has like avalanches across it sometimes. Like it's a scary ass road to follow, but the commitment to the road is everything. And I think some women, it ties back to what we talked about earlier, but the bit that's missing perhaps in women that don't get that huge level of success is they allow the avalanche to stop them. They're like, look, there's an avalanche on the road. I can't get across it. So they go, oh, I tried. And you know what? Kudos to them. Perhaps that's actually 100% okay. And they feel really okay with that scenario. I can relate to aggressive amounts of need to be successful. Like I'm talking won't like go to sleep and rest until I have my $100 million exit. And my team know this, my friends know this. It's a pathologically big, grandiose visions that I have for myself. And that isn't for everybody. And that's okay. Other women might be like so content and happy to have a beautiful little business that nurtures them and allows them to connect to others. And that is their version of success. And I would never tell anyone else that their version has to look different. I just know mine is very, very big. So I'm going to get the pickaxes out and I'm going to call a helicopter and I'm going to be like, get me over this fucking avalanche. Who has a spare helicopter in this 5 kilometer radius right now who can come and airlift me over this avalanche? Because that is how I approach it.
So it's interesting you say that, because I think about how big or small my vision is, and it sort of oscillates. Sometimes I think I want something really big, and then sometimes I'm like, you know what? Do I want their life or do I want what it took to get there? I don't know that I want to manage 100 people, and I don't know that that's for me. But I have noticed that some of my aspirations come from a place of I've just felt this mission inside of me since I was a little girl. And then some of it I'm recognizing is probably coming from a place of deep-seated insecurity and needing to prove something. And I actually don't mind that. I think maybe the anxiety can drive you a little bit, but I think you do have to be aware of where it's coming from.
Yeah. And the ego piece too, like I do check
Yeah.
myself regularly of like, am I driven by ego? And then also how much is enough? Like if I got
Right.
$100 million exit, can I spend $100 million? And of course the answer is probably no, not really. Like we really don't need that much. And therefore is that number ego, or is it because I'm going to spread it amongst my team? Like I feel it's important
Right.
sometimes.
Are you going to change
actually,
people's lives?
right. The greater good is that like the purpose and the mission of SheCom, which is the company that I'm building at the moment, is so big and so incredible. And my team is so empowered by our mission across the world that in order for me to attach the magnitude of the lives we change, I've put $100 million tag on it. Otherwise, we haven't reached the level of people that we're trying to achieve. So it's not really about how much can I spend, although I confess to being an absolute consumer. I recently had someone ask who was all about sustainability, and I was like really embarrassed. She was like, but how much do we actually need to consume? And I'm thinking, a lot? Is that okay to say out loud?
You're a maximalist. It's okay.
I'm a Libran. I like beautiful things. And wealth allows me to go and buy things that make my heart sing. Is there a problem here?
No, if it makes you happy, I think that's amazing. My mom is the same way. She loves beautiful things, she needs to be surrounded by beauty at all time. And I'm the opposite. I'm probably more like that person you had on the podcast. I don't really care about stuff. And I'm like, it doesn't make my heart sing. I do like a nice hotel, but.
But that's the bit that's really beautiful about women in the world, is that I'm not going to tell you that you're wrong, and I'm not going to say that I'm wrong.
Yeah.
I think all of us have the opportunity and the right to choose and to listen to that, voice in our head about what our version of success looks like, and the trappings that come with that version of success. You've just mentioned managing 100 staff wouldn't be your favorite thing to do, whereas I go, come on, bring it on, because I'm a leader at my core. I think the bit that I do the most exceptionally as a founder of a company is lead my team and empower my team on the mission. And then as my beautiful husband, who is ex-military, says to me, you're becoming a really good captain at the moment, sweetie. You don't need to be standing amongst your team all the time. You can retire to your cabin and read a novel, because you know that your team they're at the helm. They've got it right now. And that's how I view my captaincy at the moment at SheCom. I don't need to be involved in the weeds in my team. They've got it. I've picked the right people. We've empowered them and we've led them to being really successful in their roles. And so I guess in a broader sense, it aligns with my mission. It's absolutely aligned with the idea of what I'm here to do in the world. And I'm boldly confident about it. So that, I suppose, that is my new take on the world. That was not how I was born into the world, to be clear. Some of the things I've been through, the challenges and the trauma of life have changed me. And I'd love to find out from you too, like, is there a theme amongst the women in particular, I talk women, men, that you interviewed or that you've had the pleasure of being friends with and connected to that are successful in the world amongst challenge and trauma? Does it make a richer, bolder person? Like, what have you learned about the adversity of life?
I hesitate to sort of like put our trauma or our hardships on a pedestal. I had a therapist one time say to me, I had dated this really bad guy, and she was like, you could have gone your whole life without meeting someone like this. So I don't know that it makes a better person, but I will say that the people that have been through the most have the most to give, and they know things more deeply. They usually read people more quickly. There's a spidey sense that comes with failure, with trauma, with sadness. You understand people in a different way. I know you're nodding your head. I know you relate to that. Yeah. And I will say, like, people that I've interviewed and even know and am friends with that grew up in rough neighborhoods, they usually have a spidey sense that you can't teach, and it's like, you don't want to glorify growing up in poverty or hardship, but there's tough things that come with that. And then if you are able to make it out of that scenario, there's gifts that you have because of that that other people could never tap into.
Running an e-commerce business can feel lonely, right? Like no one in your world really understands what you do. And that's why I started SheCom, to create a space where women in e-commerce can connect, grow, and support each other. Whether you're starting or scaling to your biggest months yet, there's a place for you here inside SheCom. Inside of our community, we share strategies, wins, and real talk about what it takes to grow a brand you love. Come on over and join us at Instagram at SheCom_co, because happiness is better when we do it together. Yeah, it's a bit of a contrary way of framing things, but I agree with you completely. And I'm going to say something contrary right now because I like to call a spade, which is a bit of an Aussie saying. I don't know. Do you say that in the US? Call a spade a spade?
Yeah, we do.
I spent 8 years in a domestic violence marriage, and I have a daughter as a result who's my whole world. She's 14, and the domestic violence continues now through family court because coercive bullying, doesn't go away ever when you co-parent a child together. And whilst I would love it to go away, now I'm done with it as part of my journey. I wouldn't undo the steps that led me to being in that relationship for a number of reasons. Obviously, my daughter is one of them, but it's deeper than that. It's actually the survival instinct, or perhaps the empathy that I've been able to uncover as a result of going through that traumatic period of my life has made me a much kinder, richer, more empathetic, and I don't mean rich as in wealth, I should change that word, but a deeper, more connected, more vulnerable, more real woman as a result of that trauma. And I think there's a gift. There's a gift from our adversity. And I don't know that everybody is wise enough to look for the gift. I think some people stay stuck in, this happened to me, the world is awful, I'm scared. I think that would be a place a lot of people could get stuck. But I suspect that the common theme amongst our listeners who are listening to this is that we've risen above it, and we've been able to see the gold. You know, the Japanese have a famous saying that the vase that is broken, they actually fill the crack with gold, and it's a more valuable vase as a result of that gold crack than a vase that is perfect, that hasn't been cracked. And I love that.
Is it called kintsugi?
I think it does have a name. I'm not good with memorizing names.
Yeah.
Could well be.
Yeah. But I love that. Yeah, I agree with you. I've interviewed people, when you do local news, you sometimes spend the worst days of people's lives with them. I've interviewed people when their parents have been murdered or just their houses have burned down, just truly the worst days of their lives. And so I think it's hard for me to say it's a gift. You know what I mean? I don't know if I agree that it's a gift, but I do agree that it is what you make of it. And so what can come from it, that pain never goes away, but what can come from it can be a gift.
Agree. And that's probably a better way to frame it. I suppose it's the opportunity to empower ourselves more as humans as a result of the adversity that makes us richer.
Yeah. And I mean, kudos to you, because I don't know how you can take a DV situation and find the tools and the courage to get through that and come out the other end smiling the way you are.
Well, I'm about to write a book.
I was going to say, you need a book. That was the next words out of my mouth.
I actually have the wireframe ready for it. I just need to find about 6 months to curl up in a corner and write it, because I feel that, talking domestic violence for a moment, it's so in the shadows. It's so evil, and everybody almost whispers about it, and it's traumatic and it's dark and it's awful. And it is, not diminishing that truth completely, but we have to bring hope to it, and we have to bring light to it. And when we can bring hope and light, then there's opportunity for every woman who has experienced this to come out the other side of it, to feel richer and then not repeat any of the patterns that got them into that place in the first place, which is, of course, a really big part of it. But equally, to learn to have self-love and light and find beauty in the world again. And I feel that is literally the premise of the book that I want to write. It's about hope, really. It's a book of hope, because I think we need to bring this to the light. And I sat in a women's circle. This was many years ago now, and there was 31 women in the room, and we'd spent a few days deeply journeying on a personal development level. It was a really beautiful, very woo-woo kind of circle I was in. And one of the leaders, she said, I would like you to consider it if in your life you've been impacted by some kind of sexual or domestic violence. And then if you haven't, either yourself or your immediate family, so the immediate core family you live with, if you haven't been affected by domestic violence or sexual violence, please put your hand up. And out of 31 women, there was 2 women that put their hand up that hadn't been impacted.
Wow.
And at that point in my life, I hadn't even been in a domestic violence marriage yet. That was actually something that happened to me as a teenager. So I think
Wow.
this runs real, particularly for women. And I think it's about how we reframe it in our heads, and it's about how we look for hope. So I can't wait to write that book, to be honest with you.
Were there positive aspects of your marriage? And I ask because I find that the nuance of DV gets lost a lot. I feel like we have this idea in our mind of like a monster. And when I've talked to victims and then survivors of DV, oftentimes there's like a lot of romance and positivity in the marriage as well, which makes it even more complicated.
I had this really profound moment working with a psychologist once, and the answer, of course, to your question has to be yes. There were good moments. Otherwise, women wouldn't stay, or we perhaps wouldn't have even gotten into a situation where we found ourselves married to somebody in that situation. However, I'm going to be a little bit controversial and say that I journeyed very deeply post my marriage, Danielle, to try and understand how I ended up there in the first place. You know, I'm an educated lady from a lovely, loving family whose parents are still together. Like, what the fuck, Chuck, happened? Like, how did I get there? And I remember saying to her repeatedly, but you don't understand, we really loved each other. And she turned to me and she said, Lisa, I'm going to have to ask you again to consider that you might want to reframe that. Is it love if somebody beats you up and then tries to take everything that you have in terms of self-worth, money, relationships with your family and friends? Is it love if they do that to you? And I remember I remember the exact place I was sitting when she said that to me. I can probably even remember the weather on the day that she said it, maybe even what I was wearing, because it was that profound on me, because I looked at her and then all of a sudden I felt like the veil was lifted, where I was like, holy shit, that wasn't love. He love bombed me because I filled a hole in his sick psycho. And actually, I fell in love, but that wasn't reciprocated, or somebody would never have treated me that way. And I've come to discover there's a lack of an inability to love in a perpetrator. Like it just doesn't, it's missing. There's like neural pathways in the brain that never formed. But certainly from my side, yes, there was love, but I don't think it was reciprocal. I don't think it can be. Which is a bit dark and deep to go on the potty, but
it makes sense.
Answer realistically a question that I'm asked.
That makes a lot of sense.
So where to from here on the podcast after we've gone that deep, Danielle? We're almost out of time, but I really want to bring it back to, let's go hopeful and positive. I would love to ask you, for our beautiful listeners today, like, your expert zone, having built a beautiful personal brand yourself and be this incredible MC and interviewer and speaker and is personal brand. And I know that so many brand founders struggle with personal brand. I mean, often in my industry, in D2C e-commerce, we're so busy selling a physical product that selling ourselves is tricky. And I would just love to know what might be one of the greatest lessons that you've learned about how to get out of your own way of imposter syndrome or fear of light and all the things we've talked about today, and recognize that our greatest opportunity to sell, say, our brand products is actually to sell ourselves and our brand story. What have you learned in this space?
I interviewed a child psychologist who changed my mind on this. So I asked her, how do you raise a confident child? And she said, competence breeds confidence. So learning how to do the laundry, to ice skate, to make coffee, little things breeds confidence just by doing. And so to bring it full circle to the beginning of our conversation, which is fear, you get rid of fear and you find confidence by doing it badly, by doing it while you're embarrassed, by doing it while you're scared. And so if you look at my work from 13 years ago, when I really started on this path professionally, you would giggle. And I thought I was great. I was not. And so I just kept doing and I kept getting better. And I hope that I look back on my content in 5 years and giggle again. So I would say just keep doing. There's no There's no secret sauce. There's no magic potion. There's no one person that's going to change your life. And I don't think there's any one opportunity that's going to change your life. I think that success comes from small, consistent actions every single day. And you just got to do.
You've just got to start and get out of your own way. One step at a time is what I'm hearing from you. I have this little thing I go to bed sometimes at night because, you would know, I'm sure, Danielle, there are days when we feel like we just went backwards today. Something happened and something else happened. And then an hour later, something else happened. And you want to go to bed that night going, oh my God, what a fucking day. I ask myself this one question, which is, did I take one step forward today, albeit a little one? And I can never go to bed without saying, well, I did do that, or I did get an email from somebody that progressed something forward. And I think the opportunity for women who are scared to get in front of the camera themselves is just do a little, maybe carousels in Instagram in my generation are so beautiful because you just take some pretty photos and then put wording on them, and then you show up and there's your personal brand. And it doesn't have to be that you're getting on a television show or a podcast, like one step at a time moving forward.
Absolutely. And I think anybody who has a product also knows sort of the X's and O's of this, which is, you write down your personal mission statement. You have 4 pillars because people need to know what to come to you for. I think there's like logistical things you can do also, but just showing up.
What are the 4 pillars?
So they're different for everybody, but I always feel like if you go to somebody's Instagram page, even if they're a therapist and you're coming to them for advice, if you see on their stories that they're cooking and then you see maybe some shoes that they bought, you're like, I don't know what to come to this person for. And just because you are a full person, and this is actually, talk about controversial. This is very controversial advice because people like to say, especially in America, that women are multifaceted and multidimensional. And that is true. We are all multidimensional people. You would never know that I love shoes from looking at my Instagram. I don't talk about them. I don't show them. I love shoes, but that's not what you come to me for. You come to me for connection, for questions, for interviews, for feminism. So that is what I stick to. And so I think it's really important to not show up on social media and try to be your full self or be full to like your full person. You have to show up as those 4 pillars. And so I think doing some work on what those 4, I think 4 is the perfect number, what those 4 things are to you really, really helps.
Yeah, that's good advice. I'm going to have to take that advice because my greatest reel that blew up just recently was a food review, which is not what I am known for at all. So I've either missed my calling in the world and perhaps I'm actually going to be a food truck reviewer, or I've let my pillars get wishy-washy.
Well, here's an insight. Maybe they've been wishy-washy, or maybe people are coming to you for what is best in clothing, what is best in books, what is best in advice. And so like you could be sort of I don't know in Australia what they have, but we had like a Dear Amy column. And it was like, if you need a plumber, go to the Dear Amy site. If you need the best, anything. So it could be Dear Lisa.
Maybe that's my new 4 pillars.
Yeah.
Could be. Loved our conversation today, Danielle, and I'm pretty sure that our guests have too, because it was real and I can tell that you're a fellow woman of the heart like I am. And I thank you very much for joining us on the podcast today. It's been a real pleasure.
I'm so grateful for the time and the space. Thank you for listening to me and for creating a space for ambitious women. I love it so much. It lights me up to meet other ambitious women.
It does. And listeners, if you would like to share with me today what you've loved most about the conversation I've had with Danielle, or perhaps you want to slide into my DMs and let me know what resonated with you. Perhaps you have your own story. Please do head to Instagram at LisaJones_co, and I manage my DMs and I would love to hear from you. Danielle, thank you so much.
Thank you, Lisa. I'll be popping in your DMs.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of She Talks. I hope today's conversation sparked ideas, gave you strategies you can put into action, and reminded you that you're never alone on this journey. If you loved this episode, head over to shecom.co for today's show notes, exclusive freebies, and special offers from our sponsors. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe so you never miss a future episode. Until next time, keep showing up, keep building, and most importantly, keep talking.